Right, hi everyone, welcome back to another lecture. Alright, today we're going to do Unit 4. Okay, so it's an introduction to issue number 2 of our social studies syllabus, which is on diversity. Right, so in this unit, we'll talk about a few things. We're going to talk about what comprises diversity, especially in Singapore, and then we're also going to talk about how we can measure diversity in a certain region or certain country. Okay, yeah. So same things, this learning objective, you should understand these concepts once you're done with today's lecture, right? Yeah, and I've changed the format a little bit because the other format was a bit uh, laggy and glitchy and whatnot. So yeah, I hope you understand that. Okay, so issue number 2, diversity. All right, so this issue we're going to learn about pros and cons of diversities. We're going to talk about what makes us diverse, what is the effects of diversity, and how we can respond to diversity. So this is all under issue number 2. Okay, so unit 4 to unit 7. Okay, but first, we have to understand what diversity means. So identity is something we learned in issue number 1, citizenship and governance, right? So we're going to link that concept over to diversity. Okay, Singapore, as you know, is a country that's made up of very different nationalities, races, ethnicity, religions, and socio-economic status. So people all different sorts of background and status and whatnot, they're all living together in Singapore. Now, our identity, okay, our personal identity, you might want to add that word here, personal identity, okay, it is very very multifaceted, simply because they are influenced by the different things that we experience in society itself, right? So as we continue to interact with one another, this identity will change with time. Okay, this concept is very very important. You need to understand that identity is not permanent. Okay, so they can change over time. Nationality, race, religion, socio-economic status. These four things we're going to look at. These will play the very, very important role in shaping a person's identity. Okay, so in countries like Singapore, where we have multiple races, we have multiple religions, social cultural diversity itself will be inevitable, essentially. Okay, there's also diversity based on SES, okay, because people have different income levels. Okay, that's something we'll talk about later. And because of this diversity, it is very important for Singapore to continuously maintain harmony in the country. Okay, if not, because of all these different backgrounds and whatnot, it's very very easy for tensions to happen if we don't uh, you know take the right actions to maintain harmony in our country. Okay, so remember, identity is not permanent. They are shaped by different experiences. Okay, this is a very important concept. Okay, let's talk about the first factor comprising nationality. All right, so that is sorry, first factor comprising diversity, which is nationality. Okay, let me write this. Okay, nationality. So remember we talked about citizenship in our last issue. Yes, nationality is synonymous with citizenship, like I wrote here. The status of belonging to a particular nation. Okay, so this itself will give us the definition of nationality, and you will realize that it's very similar to what we learned in citizenship. Okay, essentially legal status, sense of belonging, sharing common experiences, all these things what makes up this word nationality. Okay, so we're gonna this. Okay, yeah, so usually people who have the same nationality have common histories, common traditions, common practices and whatnot, and typically they live together in one geographical area, so the country lah, essentially. Okay, live together in one geographical area. All right, so nationality is all these things. So you notice the word here, very, very important word we use when we talk about stuff like nationality is the word common. Common history, common belief, common practices. The word common will give you that sense that, hey, this is a group which all of their ideas are similar. And as a result, they have a particular trait. So they are of the same nationality, they have the same citizenship, they are of the same race, they have the same religion or whatnot. Okay, the word common is very, very important. Okay, yeah. So typically, right, people with common experience, common attitude, common beliefs, obviously you would be more comfortable around people like that because they already love and like the same thing as you do. They already do the same things as you do. So you will usually be more comfortable with those that share your nationality. And this might cause problems when we introduce different people from other countries who have different nationalities who come here to Singapore to work, to live, to study, and whatnot. Problems may arise with that, but we'll get to that in a moment, right? So think about that first. So obviously 9th of August, National Day. Anybody who is a Singaporean should, participate in National Day in some way or form or whatnot. Okay, yeah, because this is part of our nation's tradition. Every 9th of August, we have our National Day parade. We have the fireworks. We have the military displays. You have the red lions and whatnot. So all of these things are part of Singapore's very unique identity. Yeah, so of course we have a greater tolerance for different races, different cultures in Singapore. We love our food, obviously, right? So this is all part of what makes up the Singaporean nationality in general. Okay. Okay. Also, when it comes to language, right? Singaporeans, most of us are bilingual to a certain extent, right? So English as our lingua franca, which is the official term for common working language, and mother tongue we can communicate with one another, appreciate our cultural heritage. Okay, so this bilingualism thing, all right, used to be something that was very proudly Singaporean, right? Wanted to prove that hey, we are very multicultural. Today is not as unique anymore because most countries, most people could speak two or more languages, in fact. So this is something that Singaporeans are still proud of, but it's not that unique anymore. So that was nationality being the first factor. The second factor we're going to discuss today is race and ethnicity. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to the words here: race, ethnicity. A lot of people utilize race and ethnicity as synonyms. They are not synonyms, okay? Race, oh dear, race does not equal ethnicity. Okay? Race is physical. Race is biological. So race is determined biologically. All right? Biologically. Whereas ethnicity usually is related more towards cultural and the environment we live in. So race cannot be changed, but ethnicity is developed over time due to ancestry, due to language, due to the culture practices that we have. So all these things come after we are born. Race is determined biologically, right? So these two terms are different, right? But a lot of people still use them interchangeably, which is quite concerning, I would say. So please don't make this mistake, all right? There are two different terms. Okay, yeah. So race and ethnicity may get complex because there is no true clear definition, all right? Obviously, there are people who are Chinese who live in China, right? Because their race may be Chinese and they live in China. but perhaps their ethnicities might be different from ethnic Chinese people. All right. So, in China, there's a lot of different ethnic groups. So, yes, they may be Chinese by race, they may live in China, but that doesn't mean that they are ethnically Chinese. Okay. It is rare to identify a group of people who are of the same racial and ethnic groups. Why? Because in this world, it is very, very complex. It's usually not just, straightforward answer for you. No. Usually it's like a whole bunch of different things that come together. Okay? But what we do know is that race and ethnicity, these have a very strong influence in shaping our own personal identity. Why? Because these practices that are either dictated biologically or dictated based on the ancestry, these shape our lives. From the moment we are born, we are inculcated. Obviously, race is determined already, but ethnicity, all of this will come in from the moment that we are born. So all these things, these are very, very strong parts of our lives. So they often cause us to, or rather, these things are very important when it comes to shaping a person's identity. Yeah. So, race and ethnicity, of course, as a social studies student, you need to understand that these terms are different. But when it comes to Singapore context, because everything is already very diverse, very multicultural, race and ethnicity, we're going to use it interchangeably. All right, when of course in a spoken word. Okay, so in Singapore, we classify ourselves into four simple groups of people. Okay, based on the population in Singapore, you have this is called the CMIO system. Okay, this is a very important concept. CMIO, Chinese, Malay, Indian, others. All right. So this categorization has always been used since our independence. This has been used for all sorts of policies, and it was one of the factors that was seen as extremely necessary when we had nation building. Okay, so before 2011, all right, you could only be Chinese, Malay, Indian, or others. All right, there is no like in between or whatnot. But with uh more interrace marriages in Singapore in 2011, the government decided to change this CMIO categorization so that children of multi-ethnic parents, all right, they can identify themselves with double-barreled categories. So nowadays we will have on your IC usually they write the race, right? So nowadays instead of just Chinese or Malay, they can have Chinese Malay or like Malay Indian, something like that. Okay, so responding to changes, right? Yeah, so this is one of the examples. So with the rise in interrace marriages, we decide to have and we decide to acknowledge these people by giving them this double-barreled race category. So that is race and ethnicity. The third factor that comprises diversity is religion. Now, religion by definition is a set of beliefs and practices observed by a group of people. So oftentimes any religion would usually share a common value between all its followers. In Singapore, we have a few major religions: Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Sikhism, Taoism. Okay, remember in Unit 1 we talked about the constitutional right to religion. Yes. Okay, so everybody in Singapore has the right to practice the religion of their choice freely. Okay, so in Singapore, because we have so many different religions, okay, that exist in Singapore, uh, we have something known as the Interreligious Organization, which is this NGO that works to promote peace and harmony amongst different religions in Singapore. Okay, as part of this organization, 10 major religions, okay, Hinduism, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Taoism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, and Baha'i. Okay, so you'll see a lot of these IRO uh, thing in your source-based case studies as well, okay, because they have done a lot of work when it comes to maintaining religious harmony in Singapore. Yeah. So one thing about religion, okay, is that people can either be born into religion or they can accept the faith later in life. So it's different for ethnicity. Ethnicity, from birth, the moment you are born, you have your ancestry part, and then all the cultural practices that are imposed on you, all of these things already shape you from birth. But religion, yes, you can be born into a religion, but you can also change your religion or accept a new religion later in life. Okay, so it's not completely absolute once the moment you're born. Okay, so these things, they can change based on your personal belief as well. Of course, it's not bound by nationality, definitely, right? So religious belief, okay, they influence our way of life in many, many different ways. So different religions focus mainly on different things, but all of them, they have certain areas where they overlap, and they all believe in certain things that are universal, essentially. So of course, the things that we believe, our faith, will consequently, determine the choices that we make, what we think about certain things, our opinions towards certain things, and how we treat life in general. So it does play a major, major part in our life, especially in this diverse society. And the fourth and last factor that comprise diversity, we have uh, SES, social economic status. Okay, income, occupation, education, and ownership of wealth. These are the four things that are major indicators of your SES. Okay, so yeah, so your SES can be determined by one or more of these four determinants. Okay, so it does play a key role, all right, in influencing one's identity. Why? Because it affects, from the basic necessities. Can you afford food? Can you afford housing? All the way up to relationships with between people. Okay, so there are three categories of SES: higher, middle, lower. People of higher SES, usually they are born into it or they achieve it through wealth accumulation in their life. Okay, so people in this group, stereotypically lah, they have better houses, they can afford more food, they can afford different modes of transportation, be it cars or whatnot, and they go on holidays lah. And this is just a stereotype, right? But we generally higher SES people would have greater wealth ownership. Okay, middle SES, in between higher and lower, usually we refer to people. Okay, a lot of these people that are in middle SES, they work as white collared workers. So you need to know this term, white collared, and later on we also have blue collared. Okay, white collared workers, today we use the term PMET to refer to them. Okay, you would have heard this acronym before. Please take this down if you haven't. It's a very important term. PMET, professionals, managers, executives, technicians. Okay, so anybody, okay, that has such an occupation, we refer to them as PMET workers. Okay, so examples: doctors are some sort of professional, directors can be considered managers, executives, GMs, all right, for example, are executives, and X-ray technicians, obviously technicians, right? So a lot of Singaporeans do fall in this particular category. And we have lower SES. Now, unfortunately, it's sad truth that people that are in the lower SES may not have the means to fully support themselves. They may not have the means to, support their own families, and they do need the support from society, from the government as well. Okay, so blue collar jobs. Just now we talked about white collar jobs. Now blue collar jobs. Okay, blue collar jobs, all right, fun fact, it actually originates, this term actually originates from the blue overalls that a lot of construction workers used to wear, right? But obviously not anymore lah today. Okay, so blue collar jobs colloquially is used to refer to jobs that require either manual labor or don't require too much skill. Okay, and also people who are unfortunately jobless, unemployed, or homeless, usually they may be considered part of these lower SES. But this is the next part, and this is very important. Okay, just now those are four factors that comprise diversity. So these are the four things that makes us different, the four things that makes a community diverse. But there are many different ways we can actually measure diversity. Okay, and first of all, we start with social mobility. Okay, this concept very very important. SES, we said there's higher, lower, and middle, right? Okay, doesn't mean say when we are a child we are in the middle SES. Doesn't mean we will stay middle SES for the rest of our lives. There are a few ways where we can climb up, and sometimes because of certain scenarios we may climb down as well. Okay, this is called social mobility. SES is not permanent. Okay, it is possible for you to move from one SES to another, be it higher or lower. Okay, lower to higher SES, this transit, all right, is usually possible through education. Okay, education. And if we're moving from higher to lower, perhaps that is due to a loss in income, right? So this whole concept of moving between the different SES, right, this is called social mobility, and you will hear this term very very often when it comes to source space. Okay, next concept, Gini coefficient and government assistance. Okay, these are a few things that we use to see the amount of economic diversity we have in Singapore. Okay, Gini coefficient is a economics and political concept. Okay, Gini coefficient measures what is known as income distribution. Okay, I'll explain what that means in a moment. Okay, obviously it was named after this statistician, Gini, Corrado Gini, in 1912. Okay, so essentially it is a spectrum between 0 and 1. Okay, not spectrum, it's a range between 0 and 1. 0 is a perfectly equal society. 1 is a perfectly unequal society. So the larger the number, the more the income gap is in that country. Okay, so income gap, what does it mean? The rich and the poor, the amount of money that separates what we call the rich and what we call poor people, that the difference between those two categories is what is known as the income gap. So the larger the income gap, the poorer the poor get, the richer the rich get. Okay, if I say, oh, Singapore's income gap is widening, which means the richest of the rich are getting even richer and the poorest of the poor are getting even poorer. Okay, this leads to economic inequality. Okay, economic inequality. And income distribution is the amount of money that a person gets, essentially, throughout the entire country. So if the income gap is widening, if these are people who are earning lower income, and these are people earning higher income, then this would be my income gap. And if this gap increases, right, the distance increases, then obviously, like I said, poorer becomes poorer, the rich becomes richer. That is income gap. So obviously, with the larger income gap, the more unequal the society is economically. Okay, so in order to check and balance this Gini coefficient, right, that is growing, the government of Singapore has put in place many different things and measures to help manage income inequality in Singapore and to give citizens opportunities to move up the SES ladder. First, we have education subsidies or different measures for that, healthcare, and as well as GST. Okay, so these three areas are what the government is focusing on helping the low income Singaporeans on. Okay, important schemes that you need to know: MOE financial assistance schemes. Okay, so this is for students. The MOE CDC CCC bursary. Okay, this will help as a bursary essentially given to students who are graduate secondary school and moving on to tertiary education. Kindergarten student care subsidies for parents whose children are not old enough yet to be enrolled in primary school, so we help them basically get care at a kindergarten or student care center before they are of primary school going age. Community health assist scheme CHAS, all right, this one is for those private clinics, right? Then people can show their CHAS card, they get subsidies, for example. And of course we have the GST vouchers that help Singaporeans who don't earn as much to manage the GST. Okay, yeah, so these are just some examples that you may want to use when it comes to like a government assistance. When they ask you, for example, in their SRQ, uh, you know uh, how does the government act? Okay, maybe not in those exact words, but it can be a part of your answer, right? So example, the government provides assistance for those in the lower SES to improve their opportunities for social mobility. For example, they provide the MOE financial assistance schemes to lower income students and blah 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 blah. Okay, so it's just useful to remember some of these key examples. Of course, if you know based on your real life, all right, or based on your own experience themselves, there's other different types of assistance. Of course, you can use it as long as it is real, is factual, and is logical for your answer. And the last point I want to make for today's lecture is inflation. Now, I'm recording this in June of 2020, 2022, I mean. Yeah, so inflation is probably a term that you've been hearing a lot recently, right? Because of coronavirus, because of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and general inflation in general. Uh, you probably have heard of all these terms being thrown around in the news. Your parents may be talking about it. Yeah. So inflation itself, all right, is a general increase in prices and a fall in the purchasing value of money. Okay, you may not need to know at this level all the specifics behind the professional terms, but you just need to understand that inflation is natural. Okay, it is difficult to stop because supply and demand, the basic concept of economics. Okay, our supply in the world remains constant. We only have a fixed amount of resources in our earth essentially. Okay, but with development, with the growth of the world itself, the demand for different things are just gonna get higher and higher and higher, and supply, it remains the same. With higher demand, we have higher demand, the supply remains the same. What does this mean? It simply means less and less and less resources are going to be available for everyone. As a result, the cost of these resources is going to increase. Okay, so let me just draw the little diagram here again. Okay, I'll just redraw this to make it easier for you to understand. Okay, S for supply, D for demand, cost is C. supply remains the same. I'm gonna box that up. Supply remains the same, but with development, our demand increases because more people, more developed countries, more demand for certain resources. Okay, but since my demand is increased, more people want something, but the something that I have remains the same. So what happens is that there is less resources for everyone. When there is less resources for everyone, the cost will increase. Okay, so when the cost increase, of course you can see how that will affect people of the lower income. Okay, supply remains the same, demand increases, resources are decreasing because there's more people that want something, cost increases. This is natural inflation. Okay, yeah, okay. Usually, okay, normal inflation in a country's economy is very, very normal. In fact, it's a good thing. If there is no inflation, there's something wrong with the economy. Okay, the fact that, you know, in Singapore we have inflation, that's a good thing, which means Singapore's economy is growing. You know, opposite of inflation, uh, deflation. All right, that means that the inflation falls below 0%. The local currency increases in value, but because that leads to even less demand. Remember, it's the opposite of this thing I've drawn below. Deflation, opposite. Less demand, more unemployment. When demand decreases, I don't need so many employees to help me produce certain things. So companies may retrench people. Demand decrease, unemployment increase. Okay, simple concepts that you really need to know because they will help you in your answer. Okay, recession is another term you might hear that we will talk about in the economic impact of globalization. Okay, but recession, is another term for this time. But for now, inflation. Okay, I'm gonna repeat again. Supply remains the same, therefore demand increases. Okay, the number of resources I have in the world decreases with the increased demand. Therefore, this results in these resources becoming more expensive. That is inflation. Deflation is the opposite. Supply still remains the same because there's a fixed amount of supply in our world. Okay, but because deflation is occurring, demand decreases. The amount of resources increases, and so the cost decreases as well. Because the demand is low, factories, manufacturers, they don't need to produce that many things. Therefore, it leads to a loss of jobs. Okay, so there is inflation and deflation. Deflation, okay, sorry, not deflation anymore. Inflation is good until it becomes uncontrollable. When inflation becomes uncontrollable, this is what we call hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is dangerous because the more hyperinflated an economy is, the less the local currency is worth and the higher the price of every single good in that country. Example, history students, Germany, Weimar Germany, right, before the Nazis took over after the Great Depression. During that time, hyperinflation because government was printing more money. Okay, by the way, printing more money doesn't mean the country has more money in circulation. Okay, it just means the currency is getting weaker and weaker and weaker because one banknote, for example, is worth less simply because there's more banknotes in circulation. Okay, so you think about it this way. All right, if I have something, okay, that everybody wants, but I have this one thing and there's only one of these things, okay, in the entire world, it's very rare, right? When this is very rare, okay, this is worth a lot. But if a lot of people have the same thing as I do, then immediately the rarity of this thing drops, right? And when the rarity of this thing drops, then uh, it's not gonna be as valuable anymore, and therefore it's not gonna be uh like a much of a bargaining tool, if you would like to call it that way. Okay, same thing for money. Smaller amount of money in circulation, the currency is worth more. The more the amount of currency in circulation, the less valuable that currency is. So always remember, the more of something, the less rare it is, and therefore it's worth less. The less of something is more rare and is stronger. Okay? Money. Okay, this is basic economics, right? So hyperinflation is when, I keep printing all this money to keep up with the demand, right? But that doesn't make anything better because I'm just causing hyperinflation, just like in Weimar Germany, with the Weimar government printing all this money. Okay, that just caused the German currency to become weaker and weaker and weaker, and all the prices of daily necessities, right, due to hyperinflation, just keep increasing and increasing and increasing. Okay, so for example, today maybe bread is worth $1. Okay, if for example there's hyperinflation, next day bread could be worth $20. One loaf of bread, same loaf of bread, worth $20. Next day it's worth $500. Following day is worth $1,500. Okay, because of hyperinflation, every single day the currency get weaker. So the prices of these goods, the same product, the prices increase and increase and increase. Okay, this is just a basic concept of inflation. You don't need to understand completely the economics behind it, but you do need to know the basics because this will help you to understand certain sources and certain contexts. Okay, when you reach JC level, or you take economics, then probably you understand this even better. But for now, you just need to know what inflation generally means and what problems that inflation may cause. And of course, similarly for deflation and hyperinflation. Okay, so just take note of these terms, and maybe it'll help you to understand the sources better. All right, yeah. So that's all I have. This is just a very basic introduction to our issue number 2 of diversity. Okay, so the next few chapters are going to talk about certain things revolving around the idea of diversity in a Singapore context. And in the last chapter of diversity, we're actually going to move into case studies of different countries. Yeah, that's going to be fun. All right, so yeah, that's all I have for today's lecture. Right, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something that is useful for your assessments that are coming up soon. All right, if you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe as well. Right, so all these things, I hope you understand. It's a bit complicated at first, but over time, with more practice, with more reading, I'm sure you understand it. Yeah, so again, I hope this helped you today, and yeah, I'll see you for another lecture next time. Bye bye.